Hello friends, it's Cassandra and today we have a book review. So I read all of these books last summer and they were all good. Some were very good. So I will review them all for you, tell you a little bit about them, so that if you are like, oh my gosh, it's summer, I have time to do some reading, but I don't know what to read, now you have some options and ideas. So let's jump right in. This first one is The Leaving. I've had a bunch of people read this after I read it. It is one of the best books I've read. Period. It's one of the best books I've read. It is about 6 kids that were kidnapped, and then they come back, but only 5 come back. So it's questions about like what happened to the other kid, and all these kids, their memories are gone. They like slowly kind of start to come back. The cover art is amazing. Like, okay, just not like without reading the book, you're like, oh, like cool, I guess. But after reading the book, I remember being so impressed with this cover art. It's honestly fantastic. It's obviously fiction, but I could never decide what subcategory it was. Like, I was like, is this sci-fi? Is it mystery? Is it romance? Is it realistic fiction? Like, I could not decide, and that to me is like really great. Like, it wasn't in a way where you're like, oh my gosh, this is all over the place, like what are you trying to write? It was like there were all these pieces that were so cleverly put in there that I couldn't anticipate what was coming next, and so for that reason I was like, what subgenre is this? So it was really fun to read. It's also amazing visually. Different characters are writing and they each have their own very like unique, not only like voice but literal style of writing. So one does like more like poetry, another one has like I don't know how to call it, but like inserted block quotes or whatever. And there's very like non-standard relationship conflicts. I don't know how really to describe it other than I was really impressed that a lot of relationships, you know, there were a lot of relationships that in other books just would have became like a romance, like we like each other, but like can we like, and it was so much more than that, so much deeper than that, and even like avoided that type of relationship conflict in a lot of places that I was really impressed with. So I highly recommend this book. It was very good. This is The Line by Teri Hall. So I had my eye on this in Half Price Books for a few years before I actually got it and read it. There is a sequel and I haven't read it, and I don't think I ever will. That's not to say this was a bad book. I did have a good time reading it and I think it was a fabulous idea. But the style of writing just didn't draw me in. What was happening was very interesting and very fascinating, but I felt that the way that it was narrated, I was held at a distance. And so for that reason, I just didn't get that invested in the characters as I normally do. And so that's why I'm not going to read the second one. Just because I have so many other books that I am much more interested in reading and more invested in. So like, this wasn't a bad book. Like I said, all of these books were good books. I just didn't love this one. All the characters, you know, they were well thought out. They had secrets and histories that were well hinted at, I thought, throughout the story. The main thing that bothered me though was I got about 75% through this book. And I realized, wait a second, this is where the novel could have started. When I was reading this first half, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is so pointless, why am I reading this? But it was like once I got to the climax, I realized, wait a second, this should have been the beginning. So that was another thing that bothered me a little bit, but like I said, overall, it was a good read. I enjoyed the story. Alright, Both Sides of Time by Carolyn B. Cooney. I got these at a secondhand store in Florida, actually, and I thought I bought the whole series, and I had, except for the second one. You can't just, like, go to the bookstore and pick it up. So you have to, like, order it on Amazon or whatever. You have to order it. You can't just, like, go buy it. But that being said, I really enjoyed it. It's a romance, and a lot of you know, if you've seen any of my other book reviews, or just know me personally, I'm not the biggest romance fan. However, I did enjoy this one. It includes time travel, murder mysteries. The way that the author narrates, she is so good at, like, really low-key roasting people in her narration, and that was something I noticed right away just in the first few chapters. When you meet certain people, she'll just say something and you're like, oh, okay. It makes it very entertaining and enjoyable to read. So I'm excited to read the rest of the series. Hopefully it's as good as the first one. There's 4 books in the series. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Okay, it's kind of a funny story by Ned Vizzini. Ned Vizzini. This book is amazing. So let me just give you some background. So this book was written shortly after, like literally like days after, Ned Vizzini was in a psychiatric hospital himself. And so you can tell that this is a book about something that the author himself has dealt with. So this is about mental illness, and like specifically like suicide, and it is so good. Like, yes, everything is so realistic. It's a wonderfully accurate representation of mental illness and what you have to deal with in all, like, relationships, family life. Like, it is so wonderful. So I highly recommend this book, especially if you or someone you know has mental illness. It's very insightful, I think. Yeah, so highly, highly recommend this book. Okay, A Trick of the Light is another book about mental illness. This one is actually about eating disorders and specifically focuses on a boy with an eating disorder, and that is so unusual, which is part of why I love this book so much. I love it when people talk about things that need to be talked about that aren't talked about. So yeah, this book was very good, very, very well done. I personally have not had an eating disorder, so as much as I found this book to be like a good portrayal, I was like, I personally cannot say how accurate this is. I took this book more as like an illustration of anorexia rather than a photograph of it. And I think, I mean, you should really do that with any book on, like, about mental illness, especially fiction ones, just because, you know, everyone's experience is a little bit different. However, I've had people read this book who have had eating disorders, and they were, like, shocked and amazed with how accurately this describes eating disorders. Now, in this one, the author herself, Lois Metzger, does not, as far as she discloses anyway, she has not had an eating disorder, but she did extensive research, and it shows. It's fantastic. Within this story, she uses an extended metaphor using stop motion and stop motion films and stuff, and the way that she incorporates that into the main character's like experience with anorexia was so like impressive and honestly like beautiful. So highly recommend if you know you're passionate about mental illnesses and or you yourself or someone you know is dealing with an eating disorder. It was very well done. Okay, bonus book. I read another book last summer and it was not very good, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, so I was like, why would I mean, I could review it and be like, don't read it, but like, why bother? So instead, I'm giving you a bonus book to read that I technically didn't read over this summer, but it's very good and you should read it this summer. So it's called The XY by Virginia Bergin. Or just Bergin. Bergin? I realize I have no idea. But she wrote the H2O series, which is about basically Killer Rain, which was a good time. Not for the characters, but for me reading the book. So this is a new, I don't know, I don't think it's a series. I would not be opposed to it being a series, but I don't think it's a series because the way it ended was very like, you know. Anyway, so this is about a society of only women, and many years ago there was this virus that killed people with the Y right? Women are XX, right? Yeah. That killed people with the Y chromosome. So literally all the men are like dead or like dangerous because of this virus, and it doesn't hurt the women, which is, you know, cool for the women, I guess. But anyway, yeah, so it's an all-female society, and then one day, like, an XY comes in, and so the whole book is about that, and it's very, very interesting how the author, like, portrays what an all-female society would look like, especially right now, and the different flaws and benefits that she puts in both societies, you know, one with men and one without them. It's very interesting. She even has like a little thing at the end where she talks about like, you know, writing the book and why she chose to write it the way she did, and yeah, it's very interesting, very good. I had a good time, lots of mystery, lots of action, lots of good stuff, and it's just like a new world to explore, and I had a good time exploring it. Yeah, so these are all of my books I would recommend you read this summer. You know, give them a shot. The Line is probably the one I would recommend the least amount, but it's a pretty fast read, and like I said, I still enjoyed reading it. It just wasn't like my favorite. So yes, I hope you get some reading done this summer, because goodness knows it is so hard to do it during the school year when you also have to read like 7,000 things for class. So yeah, read these and enjoy, and I will see you next week. Alright, bye.